we are talking all things
Vagina.
vaginal dryness.
So one of our friends makes me think of one of our friends that we saw at our event in Dallas a couple weeks ago. Stephanie lives in Canada, and the name of the town that she lives in is Regina. And I was like, God, that's so great.
The first time she said it, I said, "Excuse me?" She goes, "I know exactly what you're saying." And then she proceeded to tell us that her husband on an airplane one time, the lady was like, "Where?" And he goes, "Yes, the city that rhymes with a fun time." And she's like, "I can't believe you said that to the woman sitting next to you on the plane." I'm like, well,
I feel like that's not that offensive. My husband said way worse things.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes. But no, this in all seriousness is something that we hear a lot. I have many clients that I work with where when we kind of get into the conversation of, as one of them refers to, the lady bits, it is something that women in their 30s even are experiencing more and more of. I was sharing with Becca, I was reading a stat, 30 to 57% of perimenopause and postmenopausal women experience this. Well, it's quite interesting because that's a wide range, right? Like, who's doing the surveying here? I would say, I think that it's definitely above that 50% mark in terms of the women that we work with having this.
I personally dealt with it when I was dealing with super low hormone levels. And a lot of females don't realize, like, you don't have to be in perimenopause to deal with this. I work with many clients that are not in that are probably nearing perimenopause, because perimenopause is hitting earlier and earlier now. And we're seeing it, late 30s. With most women that are starting to experience symptoms, mainly because of the chronic stress that we experience now. I mean, it's just so different than what it used to be. Societal, pressures that female have,
Toxin
exposure, antibiotic exposure, birth control creates a state of low hormones. So all of these, birth control in a way kind of emulates menopause because of the state of low hormones that you end up in. And so all of these things have now turned into, we're dealing with perimenopause symptoms in our 30s, and you're dealing with them for 10 to 15 years. And so we definitely want to discuss what drives it. There's a main driver, and then there's some subsidiary drivers, I would say. And then what to do about it, what does work, what to try, because I think there's kind of tiers of things that you can try overall. And, to get this back, because it's going to really impact the rest of your life and your intimacy and your romantic relationships and all of those things. And also your personal, confidence in general. If you are struggling with this, to make sure that you're doing things about it.
Yeah. So you mentioned, low estrogen. Obviously, you can have that even in postpartum, right? There's states and seasons, even throughout your life, whether or not, you are somebody just with chronically low hormones. But classically, we can see this with people who overtrain, undereat. And what's interesting here is that it's not just the vagina, right? So we have the vulva and we have the vagina, and that both of those have receptors for estrogen and testosterone. And so sometimes we can see for people that it's not even just estrogen, but again, that there may be, low hormones overall because those receptors basically promote this lubrication. We also see low estrogen in terms of the urinary tract, where people are getting more yeast infections, more UTIs, because again, if it breaks down that tissue in the urethra, right? But also in the vagina, like, you are going to be more prone for infection as well, because a large part of what lubrication does, not just, keeping you comfortable, is also protecting you in terms of the vaginal microbiome. And I want to just say here for a moment, it's really, really important if you are also somebody who is trying to conceive, if you are having reoccurring miscarriages, like, that you do a vaginal microbiome test to look at, the microbiome. We want it to be really strong just with a single strain, and I'm going to blank on it right now. I believe it's in the Lactobacillus family, but I did this testing prior to the microbiome seeding because we know that people who have like BV, the bacterial vaginosis, or reoccurring yeast infections or UTIs generally have some dysbiosis occurring in the vaginal microbiome. So there can be other drivers here as well, but Becca mentioned, antibiotics, right? Like, antibiotics wipe all of the good and the bad out, and that can also mess with your hormones as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And so some other possible situations, like Liz was saying, after postpartum, very common because all hormone levels drop pretty rapidly. After an oophorectomy, which is the removal of both of your ovaries, with chemotherapy, you will experience this because it puts you in a state of menopause and a state of very low hormones. On estrogen blocking medication. So whether you're on an aromatase inhibitor or an estrogen blocker, tamoxifen is a really common one post breast cancer. And then, like I said, oral contraceptives. It is going to shut down the production of estrogen from the body's natural form. And you're getting synthetic forms, but those are not going to be the same effect within the body. And so some women do not experience vaginal dryness with low hormones. Like they may be able to maintain lubrication in the area, but it is the most commonly seen with low estrogen, because what estrogen does is it essentially keeps the elasticity of the skin in the area of all over the body. And this is why you see females, more so than males, their skin elasticity declines pretty aggressively beyond menopause. Like if you look at an older couple, you will see the female has a lot more crepey type skin than the male does. And that is because estrogen is so important for the female to have that plump, kind of hydrated skin. And so unfortunately, we lose that. And this is where estrogen creams can also be really helpful if you fear the estrogen systemically, but you are just not going to get the same benefit. So like if you're taking a estrogen vaginal cream, which is typically estriol cream, E3, you can be a little bit more conservative. So if you have the fear of like estrogen-based cancers, which yes, estrogen does influence cancer. It does not cause cancer. I need to be very clear about that. Estrogen does not cause cancer. It can influence cancer cells. And so if you want to, be a little bit more conservative, estrogen cream can help with the vaginal area and improving elasticity and moisture in that area, but it does not give you the systemic effects of estrogen, which are the cardiovascular benefit, the cognitive benefit, right? Mood, energy, all of those things that we struggle with because we lose estrogen. You are not going to get that from an estrogen cream, which is why we recommend, patches are a great conservative way to start. We use injections for a lot of our clients. You can also do estrogen troches. But those are the three main ways. I do recommend avoiding estrogen pellets and oral estrogen in nearly every case because it puts a lot more stress on the liver when you're doing an oral estrogen because it has to bypass the liver. It's not the case with progesterone, just with estrogen. But we typically start, if you're able to, with an estrogen-based cream down there as like your HRT option. There are things below that, I would say below. Alternative methods, because a lot of people are like, are there more natural ways to help with, vaginal lubrication? And yes, they may not be potent enough though.
Yeah, I think it's going to be dependent on the person. I think obviously getting your hormones checked is a very wise choice anytime that you're dealing with something like this, because if you're at this level of really it affecting you and complaining, there's obviously other things likely going on too, because hormones are a downstream effect. So I think that's always something to consider. Doing your blood work in our program, we do blood work. We offer blood work with hormones as a standalone test. You go through an hour-long call with our practitioner to review that with you, give you some recommendations from a diet and lifestyle perspective. If you are interested in that, that's something you can always just click the link in the show notes, schedule a call with our team. But when we think about this, yes, there are other creams, right? There's other lubricants that you can do. Some of the kind of key ingredients you're going to look out for is like, vitamin E. We're thinking about coconut. I personally have a coconut oil that we use if and when we need that. And then in our full script, we have a whole vaginal dryness kind of protocol, actually. So we've given you some options there as well. I know that the combination therapies can make people feel a little bit better to start with before they go actually into, doing HRT. So I would definitely check that out. We'll throw the link in the show note for that. So you can go through that. I think diet and lifestyle is also really important to call out here, right? We know that making sure that you have a good amount of fats in your diet are really important. Those are very, very important for our hormones. So thinking about things like, avocados, olive oil, flaxseed, chia seeds, a lot of these are also going to just support hormone balancing overall as well, and detoxification, especially if you get some good fibrous fats in there. We want to think about phytoestrogens as well. So that can support the vaginal lubrication as it increases estrogen levels. So phytoestrogen containing foods would be things, soy. You want to make sure it's like organic soy. So tofu, tempeh, things like that. I remember we used to make tofu tacos with some Bragg's spike seasoning. I don't think I'll ever make it again. I'm scarred for life from a child. Flax seeds, sunflower seeds, chickpeas, split peas, all those things can be really good. Again, I just can't stress enough when we're thinking about soy products that we want it to be organic.
Yeah, absolutely. And the phytoestrogens, especially in perimenopause and menopause, can essentially help act like estrogen in the body. And so that's where, a lot of people worry about, is soy bad for females in high amounts, or, is flaxseed okay for females? Honestly, in menopause, I recommend it because your body just is not making those hormone levels anymore, and we suffer because of it. And so, if for whatever reason you don't want to go on HRT, we heard an interesting statistic. I actually did not realize it was this low. Only 5% of females are on HRT, which seems...
Because it scared everybody. I think it's changing now.
I think it is changing. I think the tide is changing. But you guys, why should we have to suffer? Like, I'm already on HRT. I'm 36.
36.
I'm 36 years old.
We're going to be 37. Fucking great.
I am planning on thriving. I am planning on getting ahead of perimenopause so that I do not experience... You guys, Liz and I talk about this all the time. We work with clients in perimenopause all the time. I am terrified of perimenopause at this point. My mother, luckily, did not have a horrible menopause, and typically you see it being somewhat genetic. There is a large genetic component to how you experience menopause. So I'm praying that I do not experience it like that. But I'm planning on getting ahead of it. And the sooner you get on hormone therapy, the better. They say progesterone therapy, as soon as you start experiencing shorter cycles, poor sleep, any type of those symptoms, progesterone is very safe. And through Vital, our company that we partner with, you can get on a compounded level that is much lower dose. Mm-hmm. Your doctor, and I've experienced this, unfortunately, with a lot of our clients, they basically gawk at me recommending that client gets on oral progesterone unless they are in menopause. And so good luck with your OB getting on an oral progesterone. Prometrium is what we recommend. It's bioidentical, that most people can get covered through their OB if they're open to it. But the lowest dose you can get on is 100 milligrams, which is a pretty hefty dose if you're still cycling. Mm-hmm. So, but Dr. Maritza, who we're going to have on the podcast soon, presented this weekend. She's a perimenopause expert and menopause expert. And she talked about, don't wait until you lose your period to even get on estrogen. Mm-hmm. And so we cannot emphasize enough how important and helpful it is to look into bioidentical HRT. There are things you kind of need, and this would be a great podcast. It's what should you do before going on HRT? Yeah. Because we have all of that information, and I think it's very necessary to make sure that you're not using it as a crutch, because it can make things worse. Can
we talk about that? Because I think, we got to be quick with our time here because we do have a podcast interview coming up, but I get so many people, and I mean, on the Poop Queen page, it's a lot more digestive health and autoimmune and constipation and things like that. But I still get a lot of messages from people asking about HRT, or, I went on HRT and I'm gaining weight, or I'm very inflamed, I'm constipated, I can't go to the bathroom, right? So I think, like anything, you need to be working with somebody who is wise. You need to use discernment, right? So one thing that I love about working with Vital Medical, they are very conservative. And we are able as practitioners to get on the calls with, our clients, and sometimes we'll push back on them. Sometimes we'll bring a case and say, hey, I actually disagree with all this right now. Maybe we want to spread some things out, or, I'm a big fan of try one thing at a time, move one needle at a time rather than all things. And I would say they're very conservative with their dosing, which I appreciate. I know so many women who have gone to weight loss clinics or HRT clinics, and they're not even properly testing or even following up, but rather just saying, what do you want? What do you feel like you need, right? If you have low libido, here's a big dose of testosterone. And like not realizing that for somebody who is aromatizing that into estrogen, that could end up leading to estrogen dominance, insulin resistance, hirsutism, like, if they're pushing into androgen, it could be a lot of things. So I think that, you want to work with somebody who's educated and wise and knowledgeable in this area, but also isn't there just to try to like sell you on a bunch of stuff.
Oh yeah. I actually had this conversation with someone in my DMs last week because she kind of came at me for not being licensed. And I was like, I'm never claiming to prescribe things. And she's like, well, I get that it would lower your profit if you didn't. I was like, we make $0 on our clients working with Vital, $0. And I'm fine with that because we're providing them a better offer for care. Like we're giving them what their doctors aren't giving them because there's, red tape or whatever it is, the doctor just doesn't want to. And so understand that when we work with our medical team, we make zero profit. Absolutely zero, which is fine. I'm just glad that we have them as the option to provide things that they can't get elsewhere because bioidentical HRT compounded is not easy to find, especially through a company that doesn't try to just jack up doses or lack care in how you're feeling or experiencing that. We check levels in blood work every 3 months. We make sure that things are moving properly and in a good place. And we're on those calls to make sure that things are moving at the pace that they should be at. So just understand that HRT can be such a game changer, especially in symptoms like vaginal dryness. Chronic UTIs are really common because of that lack of moisture that acts as like a protective mechanism because our mucus layer exists everywhere that we have exposure to the outside world, right? So it's in our nasal passages, it's in our mouth, it's in our vagina, it's in our eyes as females. And so we need that protection. And when you don't have that mucus layer that acts as kind of like a trap for things that could get into that area, and also urine that can leak and get kind of stuck there, that now you have bacteria building up that shouldn't, and you don't have that protection anymore. And so it protects against that as well, to have that lubrication and that mucus layer be in that area, not just for sex, not just for, comfort in that sense. It's for protection against infections because UTIs can also be really dangerous the older you get, like can turn septic, can be very, very no bueno. Okay. So the other thing to consider is also avoiding irritation. You don't want to be using really harsh products when you wash down there. You technically don't need to use products when you wash down there. And so scented things, looking at pH levels, you don't want really, high pH, low acidity. So scented toilet paper, I didn't know that was a thing, but that apparently exists. I think of like the flushable wipes. You want to make sure that you're using things that are very gentle. Like Liz mentioned with lube, if you do need to be using lube, make sure you're looking at the ingredients and avoiding fragrances and toxic chemicals. Like very, very important.
Yeah, I want to touch on this because, back in the day, I used to have some of those parties, like in college where they would come, like basically sex
orgies.
No. I believe they called them surprise parties. I hate you right now. They're like sex toy parties, but like they called them something else. But anyways, they would have these different lubes and creams, and Becca is dying. I'm going to kill her.
So perfect. You set me up so easily. Okay.
So no, but what I was getting at here is some of those products, they would be like very flavorful, right? And they would have all these like glycerin, like sugar flavors. Well, here's the thing, that those substances can actually, they can kill the good microbes. So it is lactobacillus, crispatus and parabens. We want to watch out for those as well, because those will interfere with estrogen receptor function. So when we have sugar-derived products, that's going to kill the good microbes. So lactobacillus crispatus is what you mainly want. And there's a few others. Get a vaginal microbiome test from Tiny Health and check here. But then, also want to make sure that you're avoiding the parabens. So I personally would recommend, we use Woo Woo More Play. It's a coconut oil based, very pure organic. If you do coffee enemas, you can also use it that way as well. So I've talked about it before. It's so funny. I've gotten messages. What was that lubricant company you talked about. And I honestly, I've gifted it to friends before for like Christmas and stuff, and everybody has loved it. So, again, we just want to make sure that during this time frame of life, you don't ignore these symptoms, because when you start to ignore that, like maybe it happened for a week or something, is kind of strange, and it gets progressively worse. Like Becca was saying, that can lead to more infection and just cause, more problems. So again, always test and address things. Check out the show notes. All right. So in the show notes, we are going to put the link if you want to do some testing for hormones and kind of understand your levels, where you're at, things you can do to support your body, and just all systems. If you want to do a whole comprehensive panel, you can do that. The link's there. And then also our full script vaginal dryness support protocol with several things there. And the last thing that I would say is that there are ozone suppositories that you can use as well from Pure O3. It's oxygen therapy, and they have several. I would probably I would go probably with the shea butter one if you're doing that for the vaginal dryness. But if you guys have any questions, let us know. We hope that you enjoyed this show. Apparently all about orgies.
And lube. I have lube life. That's what we've used.
Lube life.
Yeah. Hashtag lube life. Technically it's have a splash is their tagline, but
interesting.
But yeah, it's all natural ingredients. I've honestly got it on Amazon. It's super cheap. So yeah, make sure you're taking, note of what you're putting in that area, ladies. It's a very important area of the body. We need to protect it and treat it well. So yes, I just wanted to mention that before we logged off, but a lot of stuff in the show notes, important topic that is not talked about enough. And hopefully you are not having painful sex, because it's the last thing that you should be doing. And there's so many other options. And reach out to us if you have tried all the things and you're still struggling. We are here to help.